We're going to get started in just a minute, but as you're signing in, feel free to just put your name and where you're coming in from in the chat. I think this is one of my favorite parts of each webinar is just seeing the chat start to flood with people coming from all over the place. Awesome. So welcome to the virtual workshop number 6. We're on to 6 of 8 in the series. This is Get Inspired, Not Lost, Advanced Route Building Tools and Navigation with Ride with GPS. In just a moment, I'm going to hand this over to Alex Gay, the Relationship Manager at Ride with GPS, who will be, excuse me, teaching for the night on route building tools and navigation using that platform, which is the platform that we choose to use at Bikepacking Routes for all route development. And Alex will then bring in Kurt Refsnyder, the Bikepacking Routes director, to share a bit about how he uses the platform for bikepacking specific route development. But first, let's start with just a little bit of how to participate in this webinar. If you're just signing in, please introduce yourself and where you're coming from in the chat. That's, as I was just saying, one of my favorite parts about this, seeing people joining from all over. Throughout the workshop, feel free to drop questions in the Q&A. Alex and Kurt will be pausing to take questions, and I will be reading the questions that you all put in the Q&A to them. If there are any that are easy for me to clarify for you, I'll answer those via typing. And if they do end up in the chat, hopefully I'll keep track of them, but the Q&A is the best place to put questions if you want them to be answered. I don't think there are any polls in this workshop, but if there are, just participate, they're fun. And otherwise, everyone is going to be muted with their screens off other than those of us who are speaking and presenting. And we will end with a final Q&A where any questions that weren't answered through the session will be answered. And after this session, either tomorrow or Friday, you'll get a follow-up email from our executive director, Noelle, with a link to the recording, a link to the chat, which is recorded. So please keep that on topic as it becomes a living document. And any additional resources that Alex sends to build off of the topics that are covered tonight. And otherwise, thank you for being here. If you have not joined a virtual workshop yet, as I said, this is number 6 of 8. These are put on by Bikepacking Routes, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to bikepacking and bikepackers. We have over 18,000 members. If you're not a member, you can join for free, or you can join as a supporting member where you can support our work financially, which makes being able to offer free programming like this possible. Noelle is here with us as well. She's our executive director. I'm Kate Boyle. I work on a lot of the education programming, and Kurt Refsnyder is joining this webinar for the first time of the series as the routes director. Without any further ado, I will hand it over to Alex to take us through the next 90 minutes.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon. So I'm going to start us off with a few slides and then dive into using some tools on our website and mobile app and connected devices too. So, Ride with GPS. Ride with GPS is a website and mobile app that's been around for over 16 years now, founded by our co-founders Zach and Cullen as a college project. and has grown today in 2024 to, I think, 35 employees full time. We focus on route planning and navigation so that you can plan, discover, and navigate routes that are going to take you on memorable bike rides. Our mobile planner, our route planner is available on our website and mobile app. Our mobile app offers offline maps and turn-by-turn voice navigation. And you can sync your route to your favorite device if you want to navigate some other way. I'll be going through the route planner in more detail, a lot of detail, but here's a quick preview of some tools that you'll be able to use. And same on the mobile app. I'm going to be covering a lot of stuff, and I want to make sure everyone's questions get answered. If that's not possible today, please follow up with our support team at info@ridewithgps.com. They're available 7 days a week, and they're incredibly helpful and smart and able to help you with anything you need, whether that's questions big or small. We also have some really great help documentation on our website. If you're stumped and want to just look up an answer, it's probably there on our help documentation. If you go to ridewithgps.com/help. That's the end of the slideshow. So let's look at our website. And so when you come to ridewithgps.com, you'll see a page that looks like this, or maybe it looks like this. But if I wanted to create a route, I would visit our route planner, which is this button here at the top. When I first pull this up, it's going to show me my home location, if you have that set. And if I want to plan a bike packing route, I'm going to leave the city. So let's find a place that I know is a good place to go bike packing. So there's some nice options for us out here. I know that. And to start us off really simple, you can start planning your route by clicking where you want your route to begin and start clicking along the roads you want to follow. As I click along, you'll see some things be added to the screen. Things like a cue sheet on the left, a elevation profile at the bottom of the screen, and these are going to give me details about this route that I'm planning. So the cue sheet on the left is going to tell me intersections and turn instructions along the way. If I were navigating this route on our mobile app, these would be read out loud by my phone. If I sync this route to a device, these cues would show up on the screen of my Garmin if I uploaded that file from a TCX course or fit course file, or I synced it from wireless syncing through Garmin Connect. And so then I would have these turn instructions on my screen. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see the elevation profile. So that's going to tell us what sort of climbs and descents are ahead of us. The route line and the elevation profile are going to show us what we can guess is unpaved in candy cane, red and white, or solid red, which is paved. You'll also see that surface type breakdown by percentage and distance on the left column here. As I click along, I keep creating my route. but I might want some help from other things. Maybe some other people have ridden here that might give me some new ideas of new roads to ride on. And so at the top of the screen, we have this global heat map, which allows me to show where all Ride with GPS users are riding and then saving their rides to their account on Ride with GPS. And so you can see all this red are where people are recording rides and saving it to their account. And so that gives me a sense of, in this area, where there's roads, but what roads are popular. And so the lighter the blue, the less popular a road or trail might be. The darker the red, the more popular. So purple somewhere in the middle between blue and red. So I can see, this road that I'm plodding along now, medium popular compared to, say, this one to the north that I will probably end up on is more popular. Now, I also have reference to my own personal rides. So this personal heat map I can turn on, and you'll see that, I've ridden here before. I've got some rides recorded in purple. And so maybe I want to link up with some of those because it was some nice roads or trails that I rode on, as well as other places with more of that purple, or over here closer to home where I've got a lot more rides recorded. But you can see that, when I've ridden something a lot, that purple line gets really heavy compared to some of these lighter purple, or maybe I just have one ride along that road. Now, I also have this routes heat map. If I've planned routes in this area, and I haven't, but you'll see a route over here in green. You'll see more of my routes that I've created back closer to home. And so again, kind of gives me reference of where I've created routes that I may or may not have ridden. Whereas that purple and personal heat map shows me where I have ridden, as long as that's saved to my Rider GPS account. So let's turn that global heat map back on, and click along a little more. I have this option to change my map style. We have maps from both OpenStreetMaps and Google Maps. So this RWGPS cycle is one that comes from OpenStreetMaps that we've tuned to our own preference, as well as these OpenStreetMap OSM cycle, OSM outdoor, Esri Topo, USGS, and both of these USGS options, those all are based off of OpenStreetMap routes versus these Google options, which come from Google Maps. And even got the satellite option. So if you want to get a sense of maybe what that road looks like, if it's a nice enough image quality, but also perhaps tree cover, streams, those all can potentially show up here on satellite. A nice thing about some of the Google options, they'll give you things like points of interest or just things of note, certainly more prominent in cities or towns where there's services. But you can check out where you can grab some food at the end of the day, get your hardware store for some simple bike parts, and make sure you got everything for your ride. Let's finish up this route. But before we do that, we can add a little detail. On the right, you'll see this option to drop POI. And this is going to allow us to add some icons that would be helpful for when we're riding that day, or we've shared this with our friend so that they know that they're not just going to have a line to follow, but they'll have some things along the way that they know will make them successful on their ride. So we know we've got a lake there. Hopefully we can filter some water. Maybe we'd add another one there. If we might get some detail, let's see, on Google Map about maybe there's a trailhead here. Might want to just add a point of interest there too. We can right click on the map instead of just clicking on the map with drop POI selected. Rather than that, I can right click and add a POI. Got our trailhead. And if you knew about any camping spots, we could add a camping spot. Actually, there's some down here. We'll know that. Along the river. But then we can also add some detail to our cue sheet. So these are just turns that the map generates automatically. But if we know that there's more to this route than just these turns that we want to add, perhaps we got a note from a friend that said, this road is washed out, but but it's still passable on a bike. We can know where that is and say, and that gets added to our cue sheet here. So if I were navigating on our app, it would be read out loud by your phone. If I had this loaded up to my bike computer, it would show up on the screen too. Maybe it'd be a good idea to also put in a caution POI to pair it with our custom cue. All right, so this is looking good for our route that we're putting together. Let's go ahead and save it. I'm gonna give this give it a name and save it. So I can click view and I would be able to view it. I can click the X and I'll go back into the route planner where I can continue to edit it, or maybe I can make a second version that's a little different than this. So let's do that. So I know that 70 miles over 2 days is good, but I want to break it into two pieces so that I'm just navigating one day at a time. And so I know that there's dispersed camping along here at this area. So I can cut this route into 2 pieces so that I have day 1 and I have day 2. I can do that in a couple ways. So I can click split route, and then I can either click on the route line. Oops. I can click on the route line and it cuts that route into 2 pieces. We have our first half and second half here. Oops. 20. Go. Or I can click split route and I can also click on the elevation profile. Like this. But I can also, again, use that right click option and split the route. So now I've got my 2 pieces. So I can save this as Carson overnighter day 1. I'll click the X to go back into the route planner, select my second route, and save it as a new route. Carson overnighter day 2. Okay, so I got these 2 routes. I want to make sure that my friends that I'm going with have access to these routes. So from this jump to menu, I can choose collections, and I can put these into a folder so that they have them all as well and they can use them. So here I can import my routes and rides. I have both those day routes, and I'll just include the 3rd full route so they have it. So we've got our full route there. The shorter routes are tucked behind that route line. But then we've got our day 1 and day 2 routes here. And I can share those with link and text it to them or email it to them so that they can follow this collection. If I was looking at this and wasn't the owner of this collection, it would say follow instead of share. So let's look at this route again, and maybe we can do a little more with it. So I'll click edit, and maybe we want another option. Maybe we want to do 3 days or 4 days of riding. And I can extend my route in a few different ways. You know, the real quick and easy way would be to grab your route line and pull it up to the roads you want to follow. And that works well, but sometimes it doesn't stick to the roads, the exact roads that you want to follow. So rather than doing that, I find that using the delete selection tool is a good way to get the exact route that you want to plan on. So I can get that set up by using the elevation profile to click and drag so that that's selected. I want to delete this part since we're going to head northbound and come back along this way to finish. So I clicked and dragged on the elevation profile. And then I have this delete selection option on the right column. So now I have my route again in two parts. The first part and the second part. And I can click on any of these roads that I want to follow and keep riding. Ooh. See, this is a more faint heat map, so it looks less traveled. That looks interesting to me. And as we click along, oops, we'll get our line to stick to the roads we want. We'll eventually find our way back to that second half of the route. And I need to join them back together so I have my complete route for our overnighter or couple night overnighter. So this green dot is what I need to click to join that first part of the route with the rest of the route. So when I click that, these two parts join together into one, and now I have my longer route that I can add points of interest to. I could split it into multiple pieces so that I have day-long sections. I could add it to that collection that I already created. My friends would get any changes I made since they're following that collection, and they would be able to navigate those routes. So I planned this route mostly from scratch. I leveraged our heat map so that I could see where people had been riding some or a lot, but maybe I don't want to plan my own route. Maybe I want to leverage the community of route builders that we have that are contributing routes and make it easy to use those routes rather than having to, do the homework yourself. And so we have some nice tools that make it easy to find those routes. And since we're in the route planner now, I'll start us here. But we have this option with, again, right-clicking, one of my favorite things, explore and inspect routes. So explore will search a general area of routes that are in this vicinity of my viewport on the map. Whereas inspect will search for routes that pass this specific search radius. So it draws this circle and will only show routes that pass through this circle. So we've got a bunch of routes. These are the more popular routes that meet this criteria. We have public routes, so community routes, my routes, if I had any routes that went through here, or then my own rides. For our community routes, since there's a bunch, I'm able to filter by length and elevation gain, surfaces. I'm going to make sure this is more of a bikepacking dirt route. We can filter out any routes that have more pavement than mixed surface or unpaved routes. So these all meet this criteria that we set. I can either open this route Look at that, a whole bunch of POI, that's really helpful. And if I wanted to use this route, I could use it. I could pin it to bookmark it to my account. I could export as a file. Or then including the GPX track and include POI as waypoints. So those icons, I could load those all up onto my Garmin. How would I do that? Or back on the route planner, I could add it to the planner. And so this route, now I can make my own. Let's hide those POI for now. Make it a little easier to look at. So we can see that it starts and ends down here at this part where the green arrow is. I can do some things with this that, again, I can further make it my own. This route goes counterclockwise. I can reverse it. It might not be a mirror image, so forgive me if this doesn't work exactly, doesn't show the exact route in the opposite direction. Looks like there was some line drawing, which I can talk you through, which makes it a little tricky, but seems like it's making progress. A lot of those drawn lines can push the limits of the route planner. Here we go. So we've got a reverse route. Might want to clean things up here. I think it wanted to tried to make that turn, but it didn't. I can clean that up. Might want to take a fine-tooth comb over this and see how I can clean it up some too. But what I'd like to show you is, this is looks like a campground up here, trailhead up here, and perhaps I wanted to start my ride from there rather than down there where this route originally starts. So I can get to this starting point, and all I need to do is right click on the route line or on the elevation profile where where I want that route to start, and choose this option, make route start here. When I do that, it just simply rotates the route and its starting point, changes nothing else. And instead of starting down here, we're now starting up here. So it's easy to find a route that you like, but you want to maybe tweak some to make your own. You can do that with make route start here, using delete selection. It might be a good thing for me to investigate what happened down here when we tried to reverse this route. It looks like it did a loop. Let's clean that up. So what I'll do is just select that loop, a full 360 degrees, and here click delete selection. So now I need to bring this end of my route here and join it with that green dot. So I click that blue line. When I hover over the green dot, it gives me a preview like that. And now we're joined there. Did something, couldn't find the road here, so we can just snap that into place. Looking a little better. Good. So again, I did that by right-clicking and inspect routes here, or also explore routes here. Now, maybe I want to find a route down here, inspect down there. Maybe I want to splice these two together. Got this route. I can add it to the planner. Okay, and this one goes counterclockwise. My route also goes counterclockwise. That's good. Let's see if I can join these up. So I see that they intersect down here by the wart. I love that. So I want to take this Falls Creek hinterland and join them here. So I'll use my elevation profile to delete that. I want to make this route start here. I want to trim off trim off this end and delete that. So now I can select my route that's down here, starts down here, and like that. We got a big long route starting, and then we've got this end of the route here that will link in. So let's see. So we've got our route that starts down here, comes up, makes that big loop around, and then comes and brings us home. So you can take those two routes and splice them into one, because we've got this delete selection tool and means to join those into one another. So I'll show you this explore option on our web page as well. So up here at the top, we can find routes that we want to ride. And so let's see. I want to go where everyone's going in February, and to Tucson. These don't look super bikepacky, but we can find some. So I'm gonna maybe extend my search radius for some routes that start outside of town. Gives me some. These are routes that are popular, but they may or may not be bikepacking or even gravel rides. So, but I can pull up our length threshold, say to 80, and I can choose some surfaces. So there we go. These look like they would be good bikepacking routes. So I'll click done, and I'll see on the left here some different options. Hey, the Wild West Loop. And again, I can either pin this and use it as is. I can export a file so that I have that on my device, but I could also open it in the route planner so that I can make it my own. maybe I wanted to split it into multiple days. I would use that split tool and know where I want to stop along the way. There we go. Look at all those points of interest. Split it into different parts. I could reroute it if I know that one section is impassable right now. Maybe it's a climb or descent that I don't want to do on a loaded bike. There's snow, all sorts of things. So again, you can take other people's routes and make them your own. Speaking of snow, I want to show you something that isn't out, but is cool, that we just kind of are playing around with here. We'll see if that works. Some snow. So there is snow right here. Maybe I do want to reroute around this. Right now, this snow option isn't available for you, but hopefully someday soon it will be. So that could be something that influences me to change this route. Something that we're also working on: wind speed, wind particles. Looks kind of windy right now. So again, another thing that's not out quite yet, but I wanted to give you a little preview. So look at that. So once this is out, again, this is still a work in progress, but we can kind of change our weather forecast. You can see, looks like the wind shifts. Isn't that cool? All right. One thing that we haven't looked at here in the route planner is our street view. So we're able to drop your street view wherever there's this blue line, drop it down, and maybe we can get an idea of what the shoulder looks like on the side of the road. You know, this isn't going to be something you're going to find much of out in the country, but can certainly be helpful when you're passing through towns. One thing that we released at the end of last year is this new cool thing of hold spacebar to toggle. And so I have mine set to street view. So I'm just holding my spacebar down right now. I can click anywhere and then it'll drop me there right away. I can also do street view with right click. Now I can also change that to a global heat map. Toggling that off and on. Same goes with your personal heat map, but also your outlines. If I wanted to hide those temporarily. All right. So another thing that's especially relevant for bikepacking routes and the routes that they create, that you're able to purchase files from them and use for your own trips, are being able to use those files, put them on the Rider GPS first, and so you can put them on our app or maybe onto your device. So they do offer this option to purchase route files, and you're able to take the two files they send, the course file and then the waypoints file, and load them up together. So if I wanted to do that, I can click this import existing button, where I can upload a file. And I have my two routes, two files, the course file and the waypoint file. And when I add them, they both automatically are added, and I can edit this route if I wanted to. I could either by clicking the route line or using the delete selection tool, using heat map. Maybe I want to add a new route that helps me just maybe have a safe bailout option if I need to get down into town for anything. Just do that by clicking add new. I could also right click anywhere on the map and start a new route as well. And actually, let me save this one and look at it on the phone. All right, so that's saved. But here is my phone, and I'll open Private GPS, and we'll be able to check out some of those routes that I've created today. So at the bottom, I can tap library, and I'll choose routes. And here's that one I just saved at the top. With all those points of interest, I can interact with those, see what those points of interest have to say. I can tap the elevation profile to pull up some extra information like these stats. I can tap the elevation profile again, and I'm able to interact with that route line and see, okay, that's one of our high points, big peak. I could even pinch outwards to zoom in and see, okay, maybe that's not so steep as it looks like when we're way zoomed out. Actually, yeah, 8-9%, actually, maybe it is pretty steep. So we'll see the distance at that point in the route, the elevation that you're at, come to that point, and the grade, the estimated grade. We'll see our climbs and our surface breakdown. I can save this route offline. So if I wanted to use this where I'm not going to have cell service, which I would guess I wouldn't have much out here, I would tap save at the bottom and download for offline. So this is downloading. Keep your phone screen on while this happens. I can come to my offline section here and see its progress. This route is a little long, so it might take some time, but I can come back to it and we'll confirm later that it's done. But then I can also navigate this route. If I wanted to get turn-by-turn voice directions from our app or just reference the route line, I can do that by tapping navigate in the bottom left. Keeping the screen on as a battery saving tip, keeping the screen on uses battery. It's the biggest use of battery for any app, even including ours. So my recommendation is if you are navigating using our app, having the route offline is essential. Having your phone in airplane mode helps. You may have success with low battery mode that might degrade your GPS performance. So I can't guarantee that that's going to be perfect for everybody. But some people I know, instead of navigating on long distance bikepacking trips and they want to be battery conscious and conserve, they use this button on the left, this arrow, that shows your current location. And so mine is pretty far away over here in that blue dot. But some people will use that instead of tapping navigate, which is going to use your GPS sensor and a bit more battery than if you just occasionally pulled your phone out to reference which way to go. On this screen, you can tap this map layer on the bottom left of the map, where you can toggle off and on your points of interest, your heat map, choose your map layer. Something to note, when you're offline, only the Ride with GPS cycle option is saved offline to your phone. So don't expect to see satellite or any of the other map styles when you're in airplane mode or without cell service. So if your route's offline, this RW GPS cycle is going to be what you have access to. So back here offline, we see that this is downloaded, so we can be offline and navigate. Now, if I were navigating and I needed to change plans, I might need to make plans on the fly. And so in our app, a newer feature, this does require cell service or Wi-Fi, is being able to quick nav from where you are to somewhere else. And so fortunately, I'm here in a city where I can get navigation quickly on QuickNav, but all I need to do is press and hold where I want to ride to from my current location, and it quickly generates a route for me. And so I can tap Start Navigating, and it will give me turn-by-turn directions on my phone. And if I go off route, it'll update automatically. We do also have a mobile route planner, which can give you a little more formalized route planning, more formal, a little more robust than QuickNav, not as robust as on our website. So, again, you can create routes not just from where you currently are, but anywhere using the mobile route planner. And you'll get the cue sheet is generated, and you're able to add points of interest and then save this route, and this route could be synced to your device. All right. And quickly here, we've got our collections, we've got our Carson overnighter, those couple routes that I made first off at the presentation. So I could also share this with my friends from here with that share button in the upper right. Speaking of getting routes onto your device, we've got a few things that how you can do that. We have wireless syncing options for Garmin and Wahoo, and we have wired syncing options for Garmin. I'll show you how to do the wireless options first. So on our website, if you're a Garmin user and you want to wirelessly sync routes, you can visit your profile icon in the upper right and settings and connected services. And there would be a button here that says connect to Garmin Connect, which would walk you through putting in your Garmin login credentials, and then you would be set up. So any rides you record would sync back to Ride with GPS, and you would have a log of all your rides from your Garmin. But then you could also pin routes on Ride with GPS, and those would sync to your Garmin. So I'll just click pin, and then I could pull up have my Garmin turned on and open the Garmin Connect app, and it would wirelessly come over to my Garmin to navigate there. You'd see the green dot at the top next to your device, and it would sync. Oh, let me show you here. I forgot to pull up my phone. So here's on the Garmin app. This is where you could make sure that the sync happens so you can have a route wirelessly. You can do that from the website under pinned, or then also on the app under save and save to pinned. So then this route could be moved over to my Garmin wirelessly. If I were a Wahoo user, I can also set up wirelessly sync routes with the Wahoo Element app. And so I would come to my profile and authorized apps, where I can choose Ride with GPS there in the center of the screen. I would tap that, I would enter my Ride with GPS login, and then my Wahoo would sync. And any route that I pinned would also appear on the Wahoo so that I could navigate it. Now, I can also load routes with a wired connection to my Garmin. And this is helpful if you want waypoints on your Garmin. So waypoints on Garmin are what we call points of interest. So all these icons. So I can get the route line and get these icons just showing as little flags. They wouldn't be like the camping or any of these other custom icons we have, but we can get those onto a Garmin by exporting them from the website. So I'll click more and export as file. And we'll choose, we have to do two. We'll do two of the GPX track as is, like this, download GPX file. Okay. And then we'll do another one, include POI as waypoints. So those are both downloaded. My Garmin is plugged into my computer right now. And I'm gonna select that. And in my Garmin, I have some options. And we want to go to new files. And so this is what we'll come to. Downloads, both of these. I can either copy them and come back here into Garmin, do that thing, same thing again, find my new files here, and paste 2 items. And so now this is added as a route to navigate on my device, as well as getting those waypoints, all those points of interest from this route onto my Garmin. So I'll see those on the screen when I am in the area and I'm navigating the route. So that's a really nice thing if you want those details on your handlebars if you're navigating with a Garmin. You'll also see those points of interest if you have the Ride with GPS app open, and see all those with the icon types on our app as well. So let's see. Kurt, are you there? Kurt Resnider is a great route planner.
I am here.
Great. He's made a ton of great routes for bikepacking routes. A lot of them live on Ride with GPS. He wants to show you one, and he wants to talk you through his process of what goes through his mind of what makes a great route for him, and all the different ways that he leverages Ride with GPS's tools and maybe some other things that work well. So Kurt,
Yeah,
take it away.
before we dive into this, Kate, do you want to go through a few questions for Alex?
I can take just a couple questions to give you guys a break where we have a very engaged audience with a lot of questions, and I've done my best to answer some along the way. But Alex, we'll just do a couple quick ones and then I'll save some of the maybe longer answer ones for afterwards, if that works for you.
Hmm.
For there was some questions about elevation gain. Does it matter how many points you click on the route to get more accurate elevation gain?
No,
Great.
no, that shouldn't make a difference. Elevation gain is a hot topic, a contentious topic
Hmm.
on any route planning system, right with GPS, and I think just about everyone else utilizes something called the Shuttle Radar Topography Mission, which plotted out elevation for just about the whole globe, and they scanned the Earth, the surface of the Earth, and put points down on a grid that is provides a rough estimate for what that elevation is. It's not perfect, and we know that because when you put a bunch of points down that might be 50 or 100 meters apart, there's elevation change in between those points, and we just make an estimate of what that difference is between the points, and it might not be true. So something that um, you know we hope to be within 10% of real life, but ultimately the truth comes from when you go and write it with a device, say your phone or a GPS device that has a barometric sensor in it, which will give you uh, much more accurate elevation. So I appreciate everyone's understanding of the, the world we're living in with elevation gain.
Yeah, and related, someone asked, does Ride with GPS use USGS LiDAR elevation data now? Which it sounds like not.
Mm, Off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
Cool.
There are not LiDAR data available for huge expanses yet. So, no.
Nice. Are there pros and cons regarding saving a GPS route in a .fit, .gpx, or well, the other ones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So we have a few different file types that you can save if you're putting those onto a device. Benefits of a GPX file is that they're really device agnostic. They'll go on any GPS device. It was like the first consumer GPS sort of file out there. So, in the bike packing world, these come in handy because they work well on the Garmin eTrex, which is sort of the gold standard of bike packing devices. And the eTrex doesn't accept, as far as at least in the few years ago when doesn't accept TCX or FIT files. So um, that's a benefit of the GPX. A downside of the GPX file is it doesn't have the cue sheet that would be included in a TCX or a FIT file. So the turn-by-turn instructions that Ride with GPS generates when you're plotting a route. So I know not all bike packers are, really rely on the cue sheet like other cyclists might, but that's one thing to consider if that's something you want. If a route doesn't have a cue sheet on Ride with GPS and you try to navigate it, we would say this doesn't have a cue sheet. Be aware that there's no voice navigation when that happens. The TCX file would include the cue sheet. The FIT file would also include the cue sheet. It's a little smaller file when you download it, but once you put a TCX file onto a Garmin, it gets converted into a FIT file once it's on the device. So it doesn't really matter once it's on the Garmin. Um, yeah, I think that sums it up.
Awesome. I think I'll just ask one or two more and save the rest for the end. There were a couple questions regarding surface types showing up on maps as a
Hmm.
tool. And so folks are, I think, mostly wondering, is there a way to see the surface type before creating a route as a way of like researching where you'd want to go?
Hmm. Right now, that's not always that easy with every map type. Some map types might give us some detail, like OSM outdoor off the top of my head is one that would maybe give us some detail like that right now, where you can infer that this is like a hiking trail. Um, Gravel roads, not not always that apparent. Let's see. Um, I know it's something that we're interested in displaying ahead of time before having to click on a road to find out what that surface is. Um, so unfortunately, not right now. But here we go. I think in our RWGPS cycle, dotted line is bike path, and I think in this case, I would make a guess that this is unpaved, solid green. It's going to be more likely paved as like a dedicated bike path, like a off-street bike path. Whereas this looks more like a trail. Same with this dotted line, which is probably just a hiking trail instead of a bike-friendly trail. The surface type comes from OpenStreetMaps, and so that's stored as a value on on a road or trail. It might say that it's paved or unpaved, or it's bridleway or asphalt. They've got all sorts of different ways they can be labeled. The problem is only like in real life, like 20% of roads and trails and OpenStreetMaps have that tag that define it as yes, it is paved or unpaved. So we have to guess. We have to make an educated guess based on other qualities of that road. So if it's residential or not, what the speed limit is, where it is, if it's in wilderness or not. So these are all things that kind of go into the math of making a guess if something is paved or unpaved. Um,
Yeah, we use
if you,
satellite view as well often to
mhm,
try to see. And that might maybe
yeah,
speak to how he does this too with building extensive bikepacking routes with different
mhm,
surfaces as
yeah,
goal.
yeah. And if you know something is indeed unpaved when it says paved or vice versa, you can, in the route planner, use that elevation profile again to select and change surface type.
Mm.
So then uh, that gets reflected on the elevation profile.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there are a lot more questions, and we'll just pile those into the end. And just a quick reminder, it's easier to keep track of questions in the Q&A for those of you with questions. Awesome. Thanks, Alex. And we'll hand it back over to Kurt for a little bit and then more questions and answers.
Hey everyone. So as Kate mentioned earlier, I'm the routes director here at Bikepacking Routes, and I've spent a ton of time over the last 15 years putting together routes for myself, putting together routes for other people, putting together routes for you all through bikepacking routes. And those are everything from like overnighters to literally routes across the country. And so I've spent a ton of time in Ride with GPS, in all sorts of other map database type websites, trying to plan out things as much as possible in advance, and have learned a ton over that, over all of that. And so what I want to do here is just give an example of, hang on for one moment, let me share my screen here. going to give an example of one particular route that I created for myself a couple years ago, and just really quickly walk through a part of the process I go through when creating routes like this, to show a few additional tools that I use or ways of using some of these tools that are a little bit beyond what Alex just shared. And I'll answer, I think, a few questions that you all have had about kind of like how do you know if something is a public road or how do you know if it's actually good to ride, things like that. There's some additional ways you can decipher some of that. And so I'll walk through a little bit of that. And there were also some questions about like ground truthing and how do we do that for bikepacking routes routes. And the simple answer to that is we go out and we ground truth them. Like there's a lot you can do in advance, but there's no substitute for actually seeing things on the ground. So the process that I'm going to work through here is like what I would do for myself if I was going to go ride a route for myself, not necessarily what I would do the kind of the depth if I was creating routes for someone else for kind of public consumption. So this route here is one I spent a lot of time at my house, which is just over here in Prescott, and stare at a big map on my wall. And a lot of places that I end up going bikepacking are areas that fascinated me from looking at that big map. And this was one zone right here. There's a cool little mountain range in the middle here, the Arastra Mountains and the Poitiers Range. There's a little town called Nothing, which actually isn't a town anymore. There's actually nothing there. And this zone is also one that has a few different rivers that flow most of the year or all year that come together. And in this part of Arizona, flowing water is a novelty. And so this was one that I wanted to go check out. And so if you all were here for, I think it was the first webinar way back in early December, I think, when I was listening and literally driving around Arkansas doing recon for a whole new suite of bikepacking routes we're working on putting together over there. But Kate was talking about trip goals and how goals help dictate what expectations are going to be, and expectations help dictate what the actual experience is going to be. And so one of the things I always start with is thinking about like what are the goals for my trip? And for this particular one, I was looking for a couple big days, just one night out and riding all day, both days, and fairly fast miles. Like I was going to ride a gravel or a hardtail, I think, on this bike or on this route, and uh, didn't want to be doing any trail or incorporating too much hike a bike or anything like that. And so I started looking at maps of this area. The first thing I do is exactly what Alex suggested is pull up the heat map and see what there is out here. And as far as heat goes, pretty much the only heat was on this one main highway, Highway 93, and then this one dirt road that goes through here that people ride. And most of the rest of the route had no heat whatsoever, which should potentially raise some alarm bells if that's what you're trying to create a route through, because there's usually a reason why people do or don't ride in places. And one of the reasons why people don't really ride out here is it's just fairly remote desert riding. And so it's not really a destination of any sort. It's not too close to any big cities or even small cities. And so in this case, heat map wasn't all that helpful for me, but ended up starting to utilize some of the other map layers that are in here. And so I spent a lot of time in the Google Terrain View, which is this one that I've been zooming around in right now. The OSM Outdoor layer, which is one that Alex pulled up a bit ago, can also be a really useful one. If you zoom in, it shows Jeep tracks, like quite small Jeep tracks on it. These are usually the dotted lines. The kind of white with solid bounding lines are better roads, but in this part of the country, still not necessarily maintained dirt roads or gravel roads. So that's a useful layer. And I also spend a lot of time in the Esri topo layer, which just provides another way of seeing some of these small roads. And in this case, they're all kind of pale white and hard to see. And then also, I'll come back to this one later, but the USGS scans, these are US Geologic Survey, um, very detailed quadrangle maps. And these can be really useful to nerd out over, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. But so I put together this loop using those sources, and I would say what I had after I got that done was very much a preliminary route that I don't know a ton about it. I don't know that it's all on public lands or public accessible roads. Don't know where there's water or anything like that. You just have some lines that you drew on a map, which Ride with GPS makes super easy, but there's always a little bit more depth that I think you need to go into to figure some of those things out. And so one one of the early places I'll start, some of this is with the OSM. It's just the plain OSM map. This one shows wilderness areas, which in this part of the country are pretty sizable, and there's quite a few of them, and they're completely closed to bikes. You're not even allowed to carry a bike through wilderness. And so I knew that this big wilderness area, their Astor Mountain Wilderness, was here. And so one thing that I did was start out and look, okay, looks like the route that I drew, the road follows the boundary of the wilderness right here, so that's good. Everywhere else it stayed out of it, so at least there, everything's bike legal. This map layer oftentimes also shows like national recreation areas or national parks or state parks. Those all have their own rules for whether or not bikes are potentially allowed on trails or dirt roads or things. So that's where you might have to go to one of those websites to see what the local rules are for those areas. Uh, Another resource that I'll point you to for some of the planning that can be helpful is if you go to Bikepacking Routes website, go to the Ride tab, uh, and then you end up with this GIS-based map that shows up here. And so this area that I've been drawing lines on in Ride with GPS is this little zone right in the middle of the map here. And we've got some other layers we've added on here to help with some of these other planning steps, like you can turn on a federally managed land layer in here just by clicking on these little eye symbols and making them not have a line through them. And so you have to do a little bit of comparison to the other map in Ride with GPS, but you can see all this yellow, this is all BLM land. Bureau of Land Management, which if you go to the top little icon here, that has a key for what the different colors mean on here. BLM lands open to bikes pretty much everywhere for the most part, other than wilderness. So that's encouraging. And so it might look in detail at the route, bounce back and forth a little bit and see like, oh, there's one little zone over here, right in the middle of the map that isn't BLM. If you were wanting to check, like, are these roads that I'm drawing lines on the BLM land or on Forest Service land, are they open to bikes? Or if there's like a swath, like say right here, there's this big block of private land through here, and the road goes right through the middle of it. Is that road going to be open to the public? Those are the sorts of questions that can be really frustrating and challenging to answer from in front of your computer. But there are a few other places to go to potentially look and find some information about things like that. The National Forest Service website has what they call their interactive, hang on, what's it? The interactive visitor map. So if you just search Google for Forest Service recreation map, this will pop up as the first result. And it's a really nice detailed map that you can zoom in on anywhere that's national forest. So this is my backyard here in central Arizona. Any of these dashed roads on here are open to motor vehicles and open to mechanized vehicles. So bikes are allowed on any of those. So if you were planning a route through that area, that would be super handy. What we just saw from this map is that most of the route I was working on was on BLM land. And fortunately, Bureau of Land Management has their own map that you can find on the maps page of their website, which looks like this. And it's another really useful one to zoom in on and get an idea for things. And they've got a very similar GIS style um, option over on the right here. Like you can turn on ground transportation linear feature, fancy word for roads and trails. And so you can show those on there, and we can see certain areas like, oh, that big blue block that I was looking at in the middle, that's actually state trust land in Arizona. The legend would tell you that's what the blue means. And so if there's a road through that, those are pretty much always open to the public. And then one other way that in parts of the country where you don't have large swaths of federally managed land, every county in the country has a GIS website, and you can go to that website and zoom in, and they'll show, like on this one, all of these black lines are county maintained roads. And so if it's a county maintained road, it's open to the public. And so that's another way to look and see if there's no heat on something you're looking at, then if it shows up on here, well, then it's open to the public. And just because you see heat on something in Ride with the GPS, unfortunately, doesn't actually necessarily mean it's open to the public. There are lots of places where there's private trails and private roads that people that live there might ride on that wouldn't be open to you. So those are some other tools that I use for answering some of those questions like, can I actually ride where I drew this line? Um, and then really quickly, just a couple other features that I use in here that I find really useful, like when I'm creating a route in an area that I don't know anything about. If you go to the Google Map layer and zoom in, some of you have probably seen this, but if you zoom in, you can see features like the Wayside Oasis, which I remember when I was creating this route, I was like, what the heck is the Wayside Oasis? Because if you look on satellite, this is just this giant, very dry desert valley, which I didn't expect there to be anything in, and zoomed in on this Wayside Oasis thing, and what is that? It's actually an RV park. And I clicked on, oop, if you go back to here, you can click on the name, you can view it on Google Maps, and if you do that, it actually shows the website for that, a link to the website, and there is a bar and grill at this Wayside Oasis, which for a desert valley was pretty awesome to find because, well, that's a place you could get food and water out there. So that was great. And that's something you can find all sorts of things on that Google Map layer. When Kate and I were planning a route through the Alps a few years ago and trying to find huts to stay in the up high in the mountains, this was the most useful layer to find that kind of information. Everything else on the internet was way tougher to use to try to figure out just where all these different alpine huts are. And so we really relied on this quite a bit. Another tool that I use that Kate alluded to a bit ago was satellite layer. I mean, I'll create a route and I'll literally zoom in and scroll along the entire route to make sure that what I think I'm getting into is actually what's there on the ground. And there have been countless times where I'll find that a road that shows up on maps that I routed along isn't actually there on the ground. That's the case when you're looking at little two tracks like this in a lot of cases. And so like here, these are little faint roads on a floodplain above a reservoir. Helps me to know that, hey, when I get there, this is probably going to be really slow going on this section. This is not a paved road. It's not a dirt road. It's a very unmaintained Jeep road. Um, and then something else you can see that was useful to know here, this section of the route, it goes down a riverbed, which has no water, which means in this part of the world, sand. And so that was really good to know that this section through here, I'll probably be walking because it's all sand, and then you're up on sandy bank right there. So expect it to be pretty slow through that section. And then, yeah, so I'll just zoom along an entire route and get a good feel for what I'm getting myself into. And like same thing here. I thought this was a dirt road. Turns out it's a ATV trail. And so that was also good to look at in advance and get a feel for. And then another really useful tool for when you're out in deserty areas and you can't count on streams that show up on maps actually flowing all the time or much of any of the time. I'll go back to this USGS scans layer and you can do all sorts of helpful things with this, like rivers that usually have water show up as blue lines, ones that are perennial show up as uh, dashed lines. This that one's not showing up very well like that, but um, where you see these big swaths of dotted, kind of stippled brown, where there's a creek, well, that means that that's probably a dry wash most of the time. And so in this case, it's looking at, well, how about the Big Sandy River? That shows up as a nice big river on this map. Let's switch to satellite view and zoom in on it and see if it has any water at that part whenever this satellite image was taken. It's like, oh, yep, this one actually shows that there's a little bit of water in here, which is encouraging. Doesn't mean there's always water there by any means. But if you scroll along the river, you see, oop, there's a big dry stretch. Oop, there's a big dry stretch. And so this might be something that I noticed that, okay, here's places where it seems like water is found more frequently. So I might put a POI here for like water possible. And I'm not going to count on it by any means, but make a note that there is water there. Something else I did when I was working on this route was look for windmills because the windmills out here all on BLM lands supply water to stock tanks for cattle. And this was one I noticed Baker Well notated on the USGS scan layer. And so again, go to satellite, zoom in on that, and you can find that, look right there. There's a corral that's in good shape. Sometimes you can even see stock trails coming in from all directions, heading to the stock corral. and there's a big circular tank right there with water in it at this point. So whenever this photo is taken, there's water there. Again, not definitely 100% going to be there when you get there, but the more places that you can come up with that might have water along the way, very good. And then another one that I looked at like that was, undo, messed up the route. Burrow Creek up here, which is a creek that normally flows almost all year long. And this was one that if you zoom in, you can see there's water in it all the way through here. There's some big pools just downstream of where the road crosses. This is a whole stretch right here in bedrock. So even if everything else dries up, there'll be bedrock pools in this section pretty reliably. So that was one, having talked to folks, knowing there's usually water there, I was quite confident that that is a place I would be able to get water, even if I had to hike down a little bit from that. And so just make notes about that in the POIs, like I might put in here, might have to walk 200 meters downstream or something like that. So those are a lot of, that's kind of my process is create a route where I think I want to go through some of these other resources, check those out to make sure things are as best as I can tell, open to the public and open to bikes. And then once I'm pretty set on that, then I start scrolling through the entire route in satellite and some of these other layers looking for things like water and resupply options and that sort of thing. And this is kind of one of the end member cases of being this is a very remote area, not a lot out there. You can't rely on like gas stations every 10 miles or something. So one where you have to be a little bit more prepared. And then once I have this all done, then I go back to those goals that I set out with to begin planning the route and be like, well, am I still looking at a route that I can do in 2 days now that I know that this whole stretch kind of from the reservoir and off to the northwest is ATV trail and not dirt road? Like, am I still going to be able to cover daily mileage, or am I going to need to maybe figure out a way to shortcut things or something like that? And so when I originally created this route for myself, I noticed that, hey, there's Highway 93 that runs all the way along this stretch right here. And if things get really slow, I have hopping on the highway and riding on the wide shoulder on that as an option to taking the more rugged terrain to the north if I do need a shortcut. So I usually try to have a shortcut option, bail option kind of thing for various parts along the route just in case things don't go as planned, because even with all the homework you do, you're probably going to still run into things that don't look quite as expected when you're out there. And then the final steps that I go through with one of these once I'm satisfied with how everything is just what Alex already kind of laid out. You can split it up into days, or a good rule of thumb Alex told me is if the route is more than 250 miles long, it's probably going to be a little bit much for the app and for your GPS unit. And so I'll split the route into 2 or 3, depending on how big it is. Move it over to the GPS and then download it onto my phone so that I have it both on a GPS to navigate with on my handlebars, have it on my phone as backup and for offline use. I really like to have it in multiple places like that. And I'll also go through and write down key things on a piece of paper, just like, oh, okay, there's water at mile 30, water at mile 60, maybe water at mile 70, resupply at mile 75, something like that. And so I just have a little quick reference thing for when I'm trying to plan or replan or replan as the day progresses and things do or do not go quite as I expected. And then the last thing I want to show you here, just on our website, a few other resources that I included when I created this map interface that may or may not come in handy for folks, but I think they're pretty cool because I'm a map nerd. And so I already showed you the land ownership on this one. Um, there's a layer for wilderness areas on there also. We do also have a snowpack layer on this one that shows current snow depth. And so you can turn that on in here. And so that's a nice one for if you're thinking of riding, say, the Western Wildlands route through Utah right now. It's like, whoop, the entire thing is under a ribbon of snow. So that's not the right time to do that. Uh, we have for planning routes in drier regions, if you're wanting to know, like, has it rained much lately? Is there likely to be water in stock tanks or um, seasonal creeks? There's a layer here that is precipitation from like the last 30 days or last 60 days as a percent of normal. And so you can turn one of those on, and any of the areas on this map that are purple are much wetter than average for the last 30 days. The areas that are yellow or orange are much drier than average for the last 30 days. So those are areas for if you're planning desert trips and something is looking very dry compared to average, well, that's a concern if the water sources you're looking at are not 100% reliable all the time. And then we have wildfire layer on here, and this is right now hopefully not going to be an issue anywhere in the country, but you can turn that on and see if you're planning a route in a certain area. Oh, good, there's no wildfires showing up on here right now. But if there were wildfires around, they would pop up and you could zoom in and see what the perimeter is, see exactly where the fire is, and click on it, and it'll link you over to InstaWeb to learn more about just what's going on with that fire. Oh, we also have a grizzly bear territory and black bear territory on here, and I think there were a few other layers we're working on adding for planning stuff like that. We had a death mud prediction map, which was a decent predictor of where you may or may not find death mud. But that one had some privacy issues on the data source, and so we had to remove that for the time being. So we'll try to get that back here because that's a really useful one for knowing whether or not you're going to get into trouble potentially if it rains while you're out there, or if it just rained. All right, it is 6:31, so I will stop with that.
Awesome. Thank you. For those whose time's up, the recording will be sent out, but I do want to take some time for questions, especially if you had a question that's not answered yet. Hopefully we can get to that. And also after this with the recording, Alex has offered to be able to send a couple additional resources that might help further explain some things or answer some questions. So a couple questions to one technical one. For the global heat maps, does Ride with GPS use all user tracks or just user public tracks? Or is that a non-read Ride with GPS data set?
Yeah, it's exclusively Ride with GPS data, and it's just public rides.
Is there a way of searching or like scanning for POIs that are out there specifically? Someone's wondering if you could see other water sources or resupply points that you could build a route around.
Right now, my best suggestion is using in the route planner to right click and explore or inspect, because any route in that area where you're exploring would include those points of interest, and you could borrow those for your own route that you're planning. So yeah, we're also working more on some like city focused points of interest right now that we hope that would be like a public point of interest layer. But these aren't really places you would go bike packing. But you might, if you live in one of our select cities, you might see that being more visible in the near future.
Cool. It's a fun tip. Alex, could you maybe help folks understand what the difference would be between the route planning features on the web and the route planning features on the app?
Mm-hmm. So on the app, it's pretty limited as far as the robustness of the tools. You can pretty simply plot a route, make small adjustments by tapping and then dragging the screen to move the route. You can add points of interest as far as using things like deleting selection with the elevation profile. That's not a feature that's there. One thing that is on the mobile app route planner that is also on the website that I think is really handy is the trace tool. It's something I didn't mention in my presentation, but you're able to upload a file, GPX or TCX file, and if it doesn't have a cue sheet, you're able to add it. And so that's something that you'll find on both. But planning a route, especially a bike packing route where you want to have a lot of detail and be very precise, the website is a much more powerful tool to do that. Whereas the mobile route planner is something that's good to have in your pocket when you're on the go. But certainly, before heading out for a big trip, you might want to review that on the website first.
Nice. Yeah, someone also asked about auto trace, so thanks for integrating that in there. This was a good question. So on the web, you can highlight a selection of the elevation profile to see the statistics just for that section. And
Hmm.
on the app, you can like scroll along the elevation profile and you can see climbs, but is there a way
Hmm.
to select a section of the elevation profile on the app of the route to see maybe like how far it is or what the total elevation gain is, not just the start
Hmm.
and end elevation?
From two custom points, no, but for a climb, yes. We'll have that climbs option, and then you can tap on one of those climbs or scroll through the different climbs, and we'll highlight that on the route line and then the elevation profile, and we'll give a breakdown of distance, elevation gain, and then estimated time if you have uh, any rides saved to your account that are over 10 miles.
Nice. I think this person was wondering about QuickNav. Um, you mentioned update automatically. Does that mean updating from where you've gone off route to the endpoint or updating on where you've gone off route to return, I think, directly to the route?
Mm-hmm. QuickNav emphasizes getting to the endpoint, sort of like Google Maps navigation if you're in your car. So if you go off course, it'll keep you headed towards your destination. If it makes sense to drastically change up the route, it will. If you're navigating a route that you created on our website or on the mobile apps route planner, and you go off course, we'll tell you. We'll give you an off course alert, and there's an option to reroute that you have to manually select. And then when you do, it will calculate to get you to the nearest point of the route. So they function a little different depending if you're doing quick nav versus navigating a full proper route. Um, yeah, quick nav is automatic rerouting, and then navigating a proper route, you have to engage that reroute, and it will get you to the nearest point.
Nice. This might be for both of you. You know, a lot of the map layers, or a number of them are very US specific. And so are there any additional resources for planning in Europe or Canada? We'll just say other countries.
I don't have any great suggestions for that. I've relied on the Google Maps layer, as I mentioned earlier, for a fair bit of the planning in Europe. Um, I know some of the European countries at least have a really high resolution and very detailed maps that are kind of similar to our USGS layers that are all available for free through kind of national uh, governmental websites in those countries, but I don't know of any other sources for things there. The OSM maps actually also in Ride with GPS are they're actually, I think, more helpful in terms of features and trails that are included in Europe than they are in the US because that whole open source mapping was adopted earlier by a lot of Europeans than it has been here. And so people have been really dedicated in like adding things to those maps for, I don't know, probably a decade longer or more than in the US.
Yeah, I'll echo that. OSM is very thorough in Europe specifically, and the US is catching up, whereas Google Maps is very thorough in uh, the US and catching up in Europe. I think Google Maps is a downside of not having as much like outdoor specific mapping that OpenStreetMap does. As for yeah, and Kurt mentioned this, but we don't have access to them right now. But just about every European country has their own preferred map style that we haven't yet integrated, but would be really cool if we did. I hope we can someday.
Awesome. The final unanswered questions are more specific to certain accounts or GPSs. So maybe those can be addressed post workshop through emailing resources. And so I just want to wrap this up with a huge thank you to Alex for joining us to teach this.